Now, though, U.S. General Mark Milley was with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. They're in Brussels for a NATO meeting. Austin spoke about the resilience of the Ukrainian people as Russia's war nears the one-year mark.
The people of Ukraine have inspired the world. We deeply admire the resilience of the Ukrainian people and their determination to defend their territory, their sovereignty, and their freedom.
Talks over the next couple of days are set to focus on additional military aid for Ukraine, including the delivery of tanks and Kyiv's request for jet fighters. CBC's Abby Kuadasan is following the talks. She's in London now with the latest.
As defense ministers gather in Brussels, they were joined by Alexei Reznikov. He's the Ukrainian defense minister. And when he arrived, he brought along a handkerchief, reminding everyone of his country's next big ask. It had some fighter jets on it. And Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, did say yes, they'll discuss fighter jets for Ukraine. But the focus right now is on speedy delivery of weapons that's already been pledged to the country. And of course, that includes Leopard 2s. And we just heard Lloyd Austin there say that Norway has now pledged some of its tanks for the effort in Kyiv as well. But with regard to training, we know that it is now underway in Germany and in Poland as well. Ukrainian troops have been pulled from the front lines in Donetsk and Luhansk, brought to Poland for this training. It will last about 6 to 8 weeks, which is considered basic training. Generally, this type of training would take years, but certainly time is of the essence here. And we also know that Canada is playing a role. We heard from the Defense Minister Anita Anand early this morning before she went into that meeting talking about Canada's role in the training. Let's have a listen.
It is important from a Canadian perspective to continually put on the table any aid we possibly have. And we wanted to be amongst the first countries. So as soon as Germany released the permission for us to send the tanks, we were right out the door to do that. In Canada, having 25 trainers on the ground right now training Ukrainian teams on the use of these tanks is extremely important.
Now, the minister making it very clear that 25 Canadians are on the ground in Western Poland to take part in that training for Ukrainian crews on Leopard 2 tanks. She tweeted, "All of our pledged tanks for Ukraine have now arrived in Europe." We know that there are 4 that Canada has pledged to Kyiv, and they have now arrived on the continent. Germany and Poland hope their tanks, their Leopard 2 tanks, arrive in Ukraine by spring or early summer. Hillary.
And Abby, there are also concerns about NATO's ammunition stockpile. One of the key goals of the alliance is to be in a state of readiness for a fight, of course. So has it been caught off guard here?
You know, the war is depleting Western stockpiles that weren't sufficient enough to begin with. Many NATO members didn't meet their specific targets even before Russia invaded Ukraine last year. So the West certainly was on a peacetime footing, and there has been some criticism that it hasn't moved quickly enough to change that. NATO used to be focused on peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. When I spoke to Marina Myron, she's a defense expert on NATO's preparedness, she said it simply wasn't ready for this type of war on European soil. Let's have a listen.
Nobody was expecting this mix of First World War and Second World War tactics. The likes of Germany wouldn't last even a couple of days if we judge it by Ukrainian metrics in terms of, the ammunition expenditure in artillery fights. And so this basically led to everybody scratching their heads. What do we do now? We are not really that prepared for modern day conflict.
Now, Russian troops fire about 20,000 rounds daily. Ukraine only half that number at most, but it's going through shells faster than NATO members can provide them. So dwindling stockpiles in Western armies, not a new problem, not a fresh problem. And to really highlight the issue, the United States says it cannot provide Ukraine with long-range missiles because it doesn't have enough in its own stockpiles for itself. And that's from the world leader in military spending. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, saying that they need to step up production in NATO countries and they need to also speed up delivery.
Abby Kuadasan for us in London.